Hey everyone, welcome to the MobileSpace video tutorial series. For those of you who are not aware, MobileSpace is a weekly meetup in San Francisco to enable developers to develop their own mobile apps, specifically starting off with iOS. So this video tutorial is an introduction to how to build a mobile app by showing you how to build a very simple to-do list app. There's going to be 3 milestones, and each of those milestones is going to be a video, just to keep it sort of concise. The first one's building the to-do list with sample to-do items through a dictionary. So this is just going to be displaying a bunch of to-do items and setting up the first view controller. The second milestone is going to be adding another view controller wherein you can type in your own to-do item and then save that, which would add it to the list. And the third milestone is being able to mark a to-do item as complete, and also creating a third view controller, which would be a history tab where you could view the completed to-do items. So let's dive in. Also, as an FYI, this is more of a screencast rather than a tutorial, so it's going to be really informal. And you're basically I'm going to show you how I work, and I'm going to sort of just think out loud, and just this is not rehearsed, is what I mean to say. So this is going to be supernatural. It might be boring at times, but if you stick with me till the end, we should have a nice looking to-do list app to sort of help you get started with iOS development. Cool. So let's get started here. This is usually the way I work, the way I have it set up. So I'm going to go to the tutorials. So I like using the terminal because I use Git through the terminal. And okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is open Xcode. I get this thing. I'm going to create a new Xcode project. Start with single view application, that's great. Click next. Product name, I want to name it to-do list. All of that looks good. Click on next. And I want to create it under tutorials. I'm going to create it. Great. So this initializes a new iOS app for me. I'm sort of going to do my normal thing where I don't want landscapes, so I'm going to disable that. What I also like to do is when I go to launch storyboard, it starts off these view controllers looking very square, as you can see here. I like to sort of visualize it as an iPhone. So what I would do is click on the view controller and then disable size classes. So click on disabled size classes, so it would make it a nice iPhone 5s size. I'm going to do the same with my storyboard. So the view controller on my storyboard, I'm going to disable size classes. Okay, so that's looking good. Let's make that full screen. Great. I am also going to start, so I'm going to start from the launch screen. Let's first run this and make sure that works just fine. I'm going to, okay, great, so that's good. And then on my launch screen, the first thing I'm going to do is, so this window right here on the bottom right, this button is called the objects library. And I'm going to grab a label out of it. So let me get that label. I'm going to put it right there. Going to go to my attributes inspector, which is this button right here, and I'm going to rename it to to-do list. One thing you can do is if you click on the label and if you press command equals, it resizes it for you, which is great. And I'm also going to add an image on our startup screen. So I'm going to search for an image, grab the image out of there, put it up there. So I need to have an image in my assets. So the assets is where you would put your image. So I'm going to need to have an image that I can use. So I have this image on my desktop, which I'm going to use. So I pretty much drag it into my assets and drop it. And it's appropriately named icon. So I should be able to use that. So if I go back to my launch screen and type icon, there we go. And I also know that it is a square. So I'm going to resize it to be a square. That's great. What I would like to do though, so I'm going to start adding constraints on this. What I would like to do is sort of center the image. So I'm going to add horizontal and vertically in container. So that centers the image. The reason it's showing me those yellow things is because it's an image and it needs a width and a height. So I'm going to add those constraints now. Great. So the warning disappears. I'm going to add this label up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add from the bottom. I'm going to add 20 from the bottom. And I'm also going to horizontally in center. Great. So that's good. I'm going to update the frames. It's looking good. I would also change the font size to be a little bigger, make it a custom font. I don't think this should matter as much, but just to make it look a little more cleaner, update frames. Great. Okay, so let's run that. The other thing I would like to do, great, okay, so that's looking good. I usually run it on the 6S, so let's change that and run it again. I'm not sure if that was the right one. Let's run that again. Great, so to-do list with the image shows up on the launch screen. That's perfect. Okay, so let's move on. Let's start with the storyboard. So for a to-do list, we're going to have a view controller, and we're also going to have a navigation controller, right? So let's start by adding a navigation controller. So the way you add a navigation controller is you select the view controller, and on the top here, if you go to editor, and then you go to embed in navigation controller, that's what we're going to do. So if you can see here, the view controller gets embedded in navigation controller. So now the view controller has a navigation bar on it, right? So it has a title. We can name it. So let's call it to-do list. Yeah, that's great. So that's great. If you run that, and now it should have a navigation bar with to-do list. Perfect, looking good. And now for our to-do list, to display our to-do list, we're going to have a table view controller. This is what is going to display our to-do list items. So since we all have a view controller, we're pretty much just going to embed a table view within the view controller. So I'm going to drag it and drop it over there. So now I have a table view. I'm also going to add a table view cell. I need to, before I run it, I need to add constraints on the table view. So I'm going to make it add zeros all around. So table view cell, table view, oh, my bad. So there's a view. So if I take a table view, put the table view within the view. All right. And there. And there. Okay, good. And then let me add constraints as well. So I want it to be zeros all around. So it sticks to the height and the width. And then I'm going to add a table view cell as well. So when I run this, this should basically display an empty table view. Great. So that's looking good. Now, once I have the table view, I'm going to add an outlet to my view controller so that I can use that table view and add stuff to it, right? So what I'm going to do, let me open that up, is I have this table view. So I'm going to create an outlet for the table view. So you can either do it from over here, right? Or I can just select the table view over here and do it. So I'm going to call it table view. So I'm going to make sure that it's an outlet and call it table view. Click on connect. Great. So now that I have a connection, I'm pretty much done with the view controller. So I don't need to fiddle around with that anymore. I don't need the receive memory warning, so I'm going to get rid of that. Don't need this comment, going to get rid of that. Cool. So now I have this table view. What I'm going to do next is get in the UI table view data source and UI table view delegate. UI, so I'm going to do that now. So UI table view data source and then UI table view delegate. And I also need to implement the two data source methods. So I'm going to command click on data source. And here I can see that the first two methods, the public func table view number of rows in section as well as self or index path are required. But then the other ones, for instance this one, number of sections in table view is an optional, right? So these, all of the other ones are optional. So I don't need to worry about that for now. So let me grab these two functions which are required. And then I'm going to paste them right there. So I don't need the public and available keyword. So I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to make this function by adding those parentheses. Get rid of the comments. I don't need that. The same here. I don't need the available and the public. So now I have a function and I'm going to put parentheses to make it into function. Cool. So now the sort of delegate warning is gone, right? Because I implemented those two methods, but then these two methods are empty, so I need to implement these. So the first one, number of rows in section, pretty much needs to know how many rows there are in a section. So I'm going to start with return 0. And self or row at index path, I pretty much need to define a cell and then return a cell, right? So this one right here, the arrow mark tells me what the return type is. In this case, it was an int. So I returned an int, which was 0. And for the self or row at index path, the return type is UI table view cell. So I need to return a cell of type UI table view cell, right? So let's start by getting my cell. So let's cell equals, so I'm going to use my table view and then use this method on it, which is dequeue reusable cell with identifiers. So the first one, because I also want the index path. So I'm going to select that. The identifier is basically the name of my cell, which I haven't given yet. So I'm going to name it here first. So I'm going to call it to-do cell. This is the name that the cell in the storyboard needs, right? So I'm going to go back to the storyboard and click on the cell, so table view cell. And over here, under identifier, I'm going to paste it. So now it knows what the cell is. So you can see here as well, it changed the name to to-do cell. Great, so that's looking good. And then for index path, I have an index path right here as one of the params, so I'm going to use that as my index path. And once I have my cell, I'm pretty much going to say, all right, well, just return cell, right? Because that's the return type that I need. Okay, so that is good. Before I run it, what I'm also going to do is basically create a dictionary that I can initialize with a bunch of to-do items, and I can use that dictionary to display my to-do list, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say let to-do list, which is a dictionary, which I'm going to define like such. So my dictionary is going to be of type int, and so the key is going to be an int, and then the value is going to be a string, right? So what I'm going to do, the way I'm going to define it is I'm going to say 0, go get groceries, right? So that's my first to do item. And then 1 would be walk the dog, right? And then 2 would be watch a movie. And then 3 would be do your homework, right? So now I have a dictionary with sort of 4 to-do items in them, and I can access this using the keys, right? So 0, 1, 2, and 3. So coming back here, now that I have my dictionary, instead of returning 0, what I'm going to do is I'm going to return the number of to-do items there are in my dictionary to-do list. So I'm going to do to-do list.count, or if to-do list.count is equal to nil, then I'm going to return 0. And then for my let cell, so now that I have a cell, what I can do is I can say, hey, I want the cell dot text label dot text, which is how I set the text on, like, by default, right, on a UI table view cell. So I'm going to do cell dot table text label dot text equal to to-do list of index path dot row. So what this is going to do is it's going to get the index path dot row. So say for instance the first time it's 0, and then it's going to do to-do list for key 0. So it's going to do to-do list for key 0, which is going to be go get groceries, which is a string. So it's going to assign go get groceries to the cell, so to the cell's text, and then it's going to return the cell, right? So just with these lines of code, before we do that, I'm forgetting something very crucial. So in order for the table view to work, right, so once I have these delegate methods hooked up, I need to also make sure that I tell the table view what the delegate is. So I need to do table view dot delegate equals self, and as well as table view dot data source equals self, right? Great. So if I do that and if I run it now, so this should work, keeping fingers crossed. So to-do list, yay! So here you see there's it's getting these to-do list items from our dictionary. So go get groceries, walk the dog, watch a movie, and do your homework, right? Excuse me. So yeah, so that was pretty straightforward. We were able to define a dictionary and use the toDelegate methods to tell it how many, for the number of rows, to tell it to get the count from the dictionary. And then for cell for row index path, we pretty much just get a cell of our type to do cell, which we define on the storyboard. And then we, from the dictionary, we get the to do item and assign it to the text of the cell, and then we return the cell. So just with these lines of code, we were able to get a table view to work. On the storyboard, what we did was we basically embedded a navigation controller onto a view controller by going editor, embed in navigation controller. We then added a table view and a table view cell onto our view. And finally, we created an outlet to our view controller, and we call it table view. So this way we're able to reference the table view on our storyboard in our code and use that in our code, right? What we also did was on the launch screen, we pretty much added a label, which was the name of our app, so to-do list, and we added an image as well. We added a few constraints to make sure that it looked good and it was centered. And with that, let us run it one last time. So we start with the launch screen with the image and title, and then here we come with the navigation bar, title, and 4 to-do items from our dictionary. So that'll wrap it up for part 1, the milestone 1, which is which was building a to-do list with sample to-do items using a dictionary. Awesome. All right. See you guys in part 2.